Coming up today on the Locked On Hornets podcast, Nata Edwards joins me to go through the mailbag, Mehl bag. See what I did there? It's obnoxious, I know, but I don't care. We'll go through the mailbag, answer some listener questions. The Hornets released their preseason schedule, and Jeremy Lamb, just the latest former Hornet to retire. Kemba Walker, Gordon Hayward on that list too. We'll get to all of that today on Locked On Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcast, and that includes YouTube. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can make every moment more as the playoffs are over in the NBA. They haven't been even close to been going on in quite some time. Break from WNBA. Basketball isn't basketballing like we want it to. You do have the Olympics, but even when that's over, the sports, well, they don't sport like we want them to. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. There is his bright and shiny, beautiful face. It is Nata Edwards. We are calling all sorts of help. We're trying to reach out as much as we can while Doug continues to leave me stranded on an island. Nata Edwards, the Ion College Basketball Podcast producer, and you can follow him on Twitter at Nata the Scribe. Nata, I apologize for nothing. Calling you just a little while ago to see if you could do not even an emergency pod. I just all right, Nata's not in college basketball season. I'm going to bug him. And so I decided to do it.
Yeah, you're lucky, like the pods and summer shoot around where we tape these things. And basically I have a lot more free time on my hands, and I can just do stuff like listen to vinyl records and everything. So you called me at the right time because I was about to make dinner, and now I can push that back a little bit. And then exactly, we're going to have some salmon. We're going to have some steamed broccoli. We handling the earth over here, man.
Oh, handling that sounds excellent. You're eating very healthy. I need to know what vinyl you're listening to, though. What's the latest edition?
Hold on. Let me see if I can get it right. You see back there, for those of you on YouTube, I have Eddie Murphy's Party All the Time.
At first, I thought that was Al Green's greatest hits cover because they're doing a very simple pose, right?
It looks like it. It looks very much like it, except for it's the classic Eddie Murphy 80s leather. Like, that's the thing. So that's what gives it away.
Eddie Murphy loved him some leather, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
Indeed. Delirious. I immediately go to it with the red leather suit. Eddie Murphy. Well, you really delivered when I asked you. Like, it's not even just some brand. No, that you really delivered when I asked for the different cover. You can check it out too if you subscribe to Locked On Hornets on YouTube. I'm begging you, man. We're almost at 7,000 subscribers, so get there quickly.
They're going to do something ridiculous. So please, I need to see this for myself as long as I'm not involved. And I will be ignoring all phone calls and requests to do something ridiculous with you guys. So yeah, please get them to 7,000 so we can all laugh at them.
I'm going to call you. You're going to look at the YouTube page before you call me back. You won't answer. You'll look at the YouTube page. You'll see if we're at 7,000. And then if we are, then you will not call me back. We actually have some content, so we don't even we'll get to silly season stuff, but we actually have some content to get to here. The Hornets released their preseason schedule today. 5 games, 2 at home, 3 on the road in that order. So the first preseason game, the Hornets will play the New York Knicks October 6th, and that will be at Spectrum Center. A little bit of an earlier tip there, 5 p.m. for the first preseason game. The second preseason game, also at the Spectrum Center, 2 days later, October 8th. That will be against Miami. Tip time, 7 p.m. there. The rest of the preseason games, all on the road. October 10th at Memphis, 8 p.m. tip. October 15th, so a little bit of a wait there for the fourth preseason game. They'll be playing in Madison Square Garden against the Knicks, 7:30 time. Yeah, there you go. And then the last preseason game, October 17th at Gainbridge Fieldhouse in Indy. They'll play the Pacers 7 p.m. on the road to finish out the preseason schedule. Any takeaways? How much does preseason matter? Just your thoughts as you see the Hornets preseason schedule released here, Nata.
First things first, that first game is going to be the only preseason sellout that we know of in probably Charlotte Hornets history, because that's going to be 85% Knicks fans, 15% Hornets fans. And the season ticket holders that already have those preseason tickets are going to essentially be able to pay for a decent portion of their season ticket prices just off that game alone, much less the rest of the regular season games. The second thing is it's really interesting that they're trying to get all these games out early, like the home games out really early, which tells me that there's still construction being done. Those renovations from the first year of renovations aren't necessarily particularly done. They're trying to get everybody in and out, ready for the regular season, ready for the Allied tip-off that's going to be taking place over in Spectrum Center. And then the last thing, and this breaks my heart a little bit, we're getting away from those preseason games where the kids could go, where you had the field trip, and granted, I never partook in this, but those that did, like, you got to go. It was 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock game. You got to go. You got to see the Hornets, and this is how it exposes it to kids. And I'm kind of sad that no one's bringing that back, because I feel like the kids aren't really attached to the Hornets, and they have no reason to be.
I forgot what that was called. I went on one of those trips in 6th grade. I got the t-shirt. It was like basketball for education or something like that.
Yes.
And it was all kids all over the place. And they gave you like this little lunchable thing of chicken tenders. And you could either pick chicken tenders or pizza. What a great time, man. I brought a sign they played the Miami Heat.
Let me hear about this sign. What did you do?
I was in 6th grade. I brought a sign, and I was a nerd. And so I like tried to show my basketball knowledge. I was saying this is the first time that Dwayne Wade and Udonis Haslem will be in Charlotte. So we'll teach them a thing or two. Take that, Miami Heat rookies. Take that. Boy. Yeah. It was like Marge Simpson picketing against the cartoon Itchy and Scratchy because it was too violent for her kids. And then in her picketing sign, she had just a whole bunch of fine print you couldn't read. That was my sign. Nobody could read it. But I held it up, and I held it up with pride. They don't have that. They also don't have a game in Greensboro. So for the Greensboro contingent,
the Greensboro, like the Charleston squad, like the Greensboro, Charleston, Raleigh, like those folks miss out. And even with the TV deal being kind of up in the air, that kind of additionally sucks.
Well, and we didn't get information. The information we got was that we don't have information. So a part of the release was all 5 Hornets preseason games will be broadcast on WFNZ Crib. Shout out 92.7 FM, the team's flagship radio station. And it will be streamed live on the Hornets app. A local television schedule for Hornets preseason games will be announced at a later date. So we'll see.
That's interesting.
We'll see.
That's interesting. I missed that part of the release.
Yeah. I mean, interesting. Well, and you just tweeted out you just tweeted out something too, right? About
the Pelicans. Yes.
There you go.
The Pelicans are the next ones that are going free TV. It would be nice if we could see the games without blackout restrictions, and we don't have to, because password sharing is all taboo and everything like that. And people streamers get mad at you for this, and people are starting to cut down. So I would like not to be like commit additional crimes or something like that, or have the streamers mad at me or do something to violate my terms of service. So yes, please, Hornets, put these games on free TV so I don't have to worry about sharing out my password no more, please.
And everybody is, the whole Bally stuff. The sooner we figure all of that out, the better. I am hoping in the early portion of this season that, I know it's hard. Watch the game. I hope we are able to watch the game without any hiccups. Can we turn on the TV? Can we open up the Bally Sports app? Can we watch the game with zero hiccups? And then can we close the Bally Sports app when the game is over? That's what everybody wants.
Can we just skip the middleman and get rid of the Bally Sports app?
That's option number one. If Bally is still doing this thing, then my previous request stands strong. But the first request is, can we just do something without that?
Let's get rid of the middleman, please. Please, that's all we ask. That's all we ask at this point.
Okay, let's go to a debut segment here on Locked On Hornets. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast. We're going to the mailbag, baby. MEHL. I put out a post, megaphones and everything. Walker needs help. I need some listener questions. It was like one of those things. I looked at the first 15 minutes of the post, got 0 likes, 0 questions. I was like, oh God, are we going to have like 3 that aren't going to hit? And then eventually people just started firing away. I got over 20 questions. It was almost like the Joker in Batman where he goes with the detonator. It's not working. It's not working. Boom.
Then it works too well. Yes.
We got a lot of questions. Nata's going to help me answer those questions coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast. Before we answer some of those questions, I want to tell you that this episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. When your schedule is packed with kids' activities, big work projects, and more, it's easy to let your priorities slip. Even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for what we know makes us happy. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and then you can switch therapist anytime for no additional charge if you feel the need to do so. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, H-E-L-P, BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. More Locked On Hornets ahead. Nata Edwards joins us for another segment. Got some music coming in. Hopefully that helps the production value here with Doug still. Your producer, stamp of approval, going to an OG LOH beat?
I mean, it's pretty good. It's a great idea. It brings all the callbacks. It's nostalgia.
You were producing this show is what you were doing with that beat in the background. So that was an old Nata Edwards beat.
No, it wasn't. No. That was Doug. I didn't do that one.
You didn't create it, I guess, but it was playing.
It was around.
Prominently while you were a part of it. Let's get to some of the questions. I asked the listeners to show up, and boy, did they ever. Let's start off with something macro, all-encompassing. Evan Hailstorm. Thank you, Evan. He writes in on YouTube, what is your realistic dream for this upcoming Charlotte Hornets season? Right? Keyword being realistic. You know, I think my realistic dream, it's the Hornets playing good basketball, getting to the play-in tournament, finding a way to grab one of those 7 or 8 spots, and then parlaying the play-in tournament into a postseason appearance. I think that's a high-end, realistic outcome. It's very high-end in my opinion, but that's what I would like to accomplish after being denied the postseason so many times, after getting to the play-in twice, getting destroyed in the play-in, and immediately being eliminated both times. I would like to get to the play-in somehow. That would mean LaMelo Ball was balling. That means Brandon Miller probably took a step up. Miles Bridges was an adequate third option. Maybe that means
Mark Williams played more than 40 games.
I think that's true. I think, it means they stayed healthy, right? Yeah. Like let's just start there. You're right. I think that's my realistic dream, Nata. It's watching all the guys that realistically should improve. We see it. They get to the play-in, they parlay the play-in tournament appearance into a playoff appearance. That's what I would want to see.
Absolutely. Mine is, I will say this, 36 wins and a top 3 spot in the lottery. Like, they get 36 wins. They're going to be 15 wins better than they were last year. And somehow they jump in the lottery. Like, that's my best case realistic scenario. Because that way, no matter what happens, you add another guy that's probably going to be a star. You're talking about a VJ Edgecombe, Cooper Flag. Like, you want to talk about best realistic scenario? Like that, I think it's that one.
A top 3 pick would be amazing. And to not have to tank, seeing the improvement and being able to change your future for the way better with one of those guys coming in. You're right. Like, long term, that's probably the better option that you bring. But if we're just looking at
I want, like, trust me, I want your scenario to work so bad because everybody around here that is stuck with this team, despite the fact that they embarrass us in public multiple times, despite that, we stick around. And so I want this nice little I want your scenario more than mine because if it's mine, we're going to have a whole bunch of other conversations, and they're going to pick someone that we don't expect, kind of like they did this year, and we're all going to be confused.
Yeah.
And we're like, at some point, the hope has to turn into actual wins. And so I'm hoping for your scenario more than mine.
Let's go to the next one. We got a lot of good ones too. I'm not even just saying that. It me, Jack, 6945. That's who writes this one in. I like this one. Obviously, he will be working with all players, but who personally would you like to see Kemba coach up the most? Who do you want him to rub off on a little more so? My answer would be NSJ. That is It Me, Jack writing in. So his answer is Nick Smith Jr.
That is a really good answer.
Yeah, explain. Do you like
it's mine? That
too?
would be mine.
Okay.
That would probably be mine because I think with Kemba maxed out everything. I am not sure Nick Smith has maxed out. If there's going to be a guy that can get the best out of Nick Smith Jr., it should be Kemba Walker. And as long as Nick Smith Jr. and he's allegedly been putting in the work, that's the guy for me at least.
I have a wild one. LaMelo is the easy answer. Point guard, franchise guy.
It's a cheap one.
It is. No, you're right. But I've got one. How about Mark Williams? This is where I'm coming at you with Mark Williams.
I know where you're going with this. I agree.
As much as Cody Zeller is like this, it's interesting to see what Hornets fans think about his tenure here. Like, was always solid, classic Doug argument. Didn't do a lot in the box score, but still mattered. We had the 3-17 record when Cody Zeller went out that first time with an ankle injury, and he mattered to this team.
Yeah.
Kemba and Cody would sing some pretty nice music where Kemba was the beneficiary offensively for most of it, right? But you know what I'm saying? Like, could Kemba just continuously be in Mark's ear about what a point guard wants in the pick and roll, pick and pop with Charles Lee talking to him? Like, constant communication between the point guard, LaMelo, and Mark, like with Mark being the communicator on the back end, saying, hey, like, okay, LaMelo gets beat. I'm going to step up and take care of his guy that gets beat. I just think Kemba as a point guard controlling the center in the pick and roll during his playing days, can Mark pick the brain of Kemba, like, and start to apply that to working with LaMelo. I don't think I'm stretching too hard.
No, you're not stretching too hard. That's not where I thought you were going. I thought you were going with hey, if there's anybody that knows how to improve their jump shot and to work on their jump shot, that Kemba is the example. That is also a really good reason. But I would also point out, like, if that's the case, I'm not sure it's Mark that he needs to be working with. It's Nick Richards. Nick Richards has the worst timing of any sort of big in terms of a screen. Like, it was a guarantee at some point in the last 2 years. The Hornets go on a run. They're starting to feel good. And then Nick Richards, inadvertent moving screen, turnover, run over. Like, that's the thing with Nick Richards. So, again, if we're going to do that, he's got to work with the entire center group at this point. That because it's that bad, and we don't need those kind of like run-stopping, moving screens like that anymore.
Oh, Steve Clifford, set the bleeping screen.
Yes.
Immediately comes to mind. Last one before we go to the last segment. Here's another good one. This one comes in from Amber B. Homick, 866. Sorry if I butchered your last name, Halmick. I apologize, but Amber, we appreciate you writing in. This is a good one. With back to school time here, which Hornet do you think has changed the most over the summer to reinvent himself for the new season? Maybe it's Muscle Watch Miller, Fresh Cut Man, Extra Ink Mellow. Gotta love silly season. We do, Amber. You get the show. Appreciate you writing in. I've got one. I'll go first on this one. Nick Smith Jr. was your answer last time. I'm going to go with Summer School NSJ. We got to see him. You talk about reinventing yourself. He played pretty damn differently in Summer League. At least he was asked to do more things, right?
Yeah.
When we talked with Josh Longstaff on Wes and Walker, Charles Lee, they threw a ton at NSJ. They asked him to guard the best perimeter offensive player every single matchup. They had him more on ball. They had him facilitating, which wasn't his strong suit last year. He was come off of the bench, get some shots up, see how many buckets you can get for his guy. and they just asked him to think a little more. They asked him to make a lot more. They asked him to handle decision making in summer league, and that is different from what he was doing last year. As far as totally reinventing yourself or working on something that was a big weakness, summer school NSJ is my answer, Nata.
So I agree with it. I see where you're coming from, and he would be my answer. Vasa Micic is a good candidate for this, especially when you see what he's doing in overseas right now in the Olympics. He has been Serbia's second best player by a large margin. Now,
Dude, he's been good.
He's been good.
That Australia game was nuts. He was good down the stretch there.
If he develops even something resembling a just decent jump shot, that man is a bona fide backup point guard. And remember, you still have him under contract for the next 2 seasons. Yeah, that's the guy. If he just reinvents himself, or just adds one small little tweak, hit like I'm not even asking for like 38, 39 from 3. Just give me 35. He's good enough to where, and I trust the first step enough to where if he does that, he's going to be a very effective rotation guy that even if your timeline doesn't match his, he's going to be a valuable trade piece that'll get you more assets down the line when it comes to the trade deadline.
Yeah, Olympic Micic is your answer. He's been good. Micic. Yeah, Josh Green putting up a goose egg, not so much offensively. That's I know.
Yeah,
I know we don't care. I know we don't care as far as how it pertains to the Hornets, but like going 4 games scoreless is extreme. Not a single point. That's a lot. But I still like Josh Green, so maybe we can even talk about him in the next segment. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast, we have more questions to get to. We are rummaging through the Sicko Satchel. We are going through the mailbag. And Jeremy Lamb retires. Another former Hornet deciding to hang him up. We'll get to all of it here in just a moment on Locked On Hornets. Before we answer a few more questions, before we talk about the career of Jeremy Lamb, I want to tell you that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never really want them to stop. But as the playoffs are over, the NBA season is not here. We have to wait a while before we get to the preseason. We get fewer games in the sports. They're just not sporting like I want them to. But FanDuel, it lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app, dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood, and I'm golden, baby. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Head over to FanDuel.com. Start making the most out of your summer right now. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Plenty more Locked On Hornets to come, answering questions, talking Jeremy Lamb in just a moment. So, bringing back Nata in. As we look at some of the other questions, I wanted to get to this before we break down Jeremy Lamb stuff.
Yeah.
The other question here is, if the NBA had an expansion draft, who are your 7 players that you're keeping safe? Bill Simmons talked about this. This question coming in from Out of Tuck, by the way. Thank you, Out of Tuck. Bill Simmons had this, I think, like a couple months ago. We were asked this question, I think, before they made the moves that they did in the offseason. So perhaps the answer changes a little bit. I bring this up because it's not easy. I mean, it gets a little harder on the back end, but the 7 guys I came up with, Nata, it was LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller, Mark Williams, Miles Bridges, Josh Green, Grant Williams, Tajon Salon. That's not any order, but those are the 7 that I came up with. The guys on the outside looking in, the 2 that I had trouble with, it was Nick Smith Jr. Was Trey Mann. Trey Mann was tough for me too. Micic, just like asset retention, like because he can get some value on the trade market. Seth Curry, Cody Martin, just those aren't guys that you're protecting anymore. So at that point, it got easy. Nick Richards too, like asset retention, that would be tough.
Yeah.
Do you like the 7 I came up with, or would you change?
I would swap one, and it's going to get everybody in the comments mad at me. I would probably swap out Miles for probably either Mann or Nick Smith Jr.
Whoa. Okay, explain yourself.
Just for salary purposes, quite honestly. We see this all the time when it comes to expansion drafts. You always see those high price guys. You're like, whoa, you're leaving him out there. But if you're talking about financial flexibility, and I understand it's it's a declining contract, but at the same point, like I would like that extra 20 million in flexibility, especially if you're talking about a year, 2 years down the line, and you're trying to have to sign a Mark Williams and you're having to sign a Brandon Miller to a rookie max. I would like that extra money so I can do a few other things. And the biggest thing that we're seeing with this NBA salary cap is kind of the financial flexibility to do a lot of things. And I would much rather have that financial flexibility than have Miles if we're talking about a whole bunch of other stuff. If we're talking about subtracting 23 million dollars at this point.
Yeah, for me, it's losing a player of Miles' caliber for nothing. Yeah, like, and you could have done that this offseason, right? The 25 million, it's 25 million is a totally fair contract given what his skill is compared to what everybody else is making. I thought this might get up to 30 with how many contracts were overpays, and I thought, okay, if that's the point, then I'm good. Like, I'd rather just have the flexibility. But if they bring him back, I see a world where you either one get some nice value in return, or Miles does help him. Like, he is still a good player. He's their third offensive option, but
it's not about talent. It's really not about talent for me. It's because talent wise, yes, you keep him, but at some point, like, and we're seeing this around the league, you're going to need that financial flexibility to make deals, to sign additional contracts. We just saw the Utah Jazz having to extend Larry Markkinen, basically have to cut Taylor Horton-Tucker and Kyra Lewis, two guys that were kind of intriguing. Now, granted, they were free agents, but they released their rights, and that's something that can eat away at your depth. I would much rather try to build that depth. I think we have an idea of who the top three really are on this team. Money-wise, it's going to have to be on the Hornets to figure that out, and I'm not sure they're ready to make those full-time decisions, you know?
Nick Smith Jr. or Trey Mann, who would be the harder one to leave? I guess who would you bring in? If Miles is your guy out, who would you bring in?
It's probably Nick Smith Jr. because of the rookie contract. Trey Mann is a free agent at the end of the season, and you still, like, that's going to be an interesting, like, we talk about training camp battles. That's going to be an interesting one, Nick Smith Jr. or Trey Mann, because one of those guys is going to be relegated to the 8th, 9th man position. And at this point, I would assume it's Nick Smith Jr., but he has a lot of time to catch up.
Yeah, it's Trey, and Trey was good. Like, I really enjoyed Trey. Micic and Trey were like fun guards off of the bench that did some different stuff. But this coaching staff loves Nick Smith Jr. Like, it's interesting to hear them talk about what he could become. Both Charles Lee, Longstaff, like, that was their biggest project, it felt like, in Summer League, was working with him. And we just talked about
makes sense. But it makes sense, though, with Nick Smith Jr., because you got to remember, and I know everyone hates to bring up high school rankings, but that dude was the number one player in the country coming into Arkansas. He was ranked higher than Brandon Miller. There is a reason for that, even if the reason is sometimes very stupid. That guy can score. If he ever figures it out, he is going to do some damage in a Malik Monk-like role.
Well, and you can see, like, it happens both ways, but for instance, like a Jaden McDaniels, right? Mm-hmm. Like, Jaden McDaniels was also one of these guys, crazy high rated in high school, and goes to the second round as a later pick. And then now he's a pivotal part of what Minnesota is able to do. Different skill set, not the same player at all, but that kind of thinking. High school ranking, falls a little bit in the draft, has some weird college season or two, and then eventually they still figured out and become a useful NBA player. Speaking of useful NBA player, Jeremy Lamb was that man. He became a useful NBA player here in Charlotte. Adrian Wojnarowski reported earlier today, Jeremy Lamb, who played 573 NBA games with Oklahoma City, the Charlotte Hornets, Indiana Pacers, finally the Sacramento Kings. Jeremy Lamb is retiring from basketball, he announced on Instagram. Jeremy Lamb was a part of UConn's 2011 NCAA championship team. And, of course, he played and won that championship with Hornets great Kemba Walker, and then teamed up with him again here in Charlotte. This goes to a question also on the Sicko Satchel / mailbag. QCT wrote in, where were you when Jeremy Lamb hit the shot? Nata, you want to answer this one?
Man, I was watching this game because, this was because the funny thing, like I was watching that game, I was stunned. My jaw hit the floor. I think I remember us doing an episode after that about the shot. Like, there's a lot of that just like that's the second greatest Charlotte Hornets buzzer beater ever. There's only one better, and it's Alonzo Mourning in '93. No, I will not argue with you about any. Those are the top two.
It means a lot.
Somebody
Yeah,
else.
It's the shot that matters the most as far as, you know, beating a team in the series. Even if that Celtics team wasn't what they used to be, like that was the final nail in the coffin for them. Yeah. And it's a playoff series buzzer beater. What are you going to do? So,
like, again, they effectively retired Kevin McHale. Alonzo Mourning effectively retired Kevin McHale with that shot. So think about that the gravitas that with that statement alone, that's like kind of the thing. Like, that's why it's bigger. But other than that, Jeremy Lamb, like, I hope that man is throwing as many darts in as many taverns around Charlotte as he can in retirement. I know we're probably going to see him around in Charlotte. But again, that man had a great career and a player development story that, just because you start somewhere doesn't mean it's ever going to end up where you think it is. It's another reason to, like, pump the brakes on guys in their third, fourth, fifth year.
Yep. Speaking of darts, by the way, peep the emoji with Jeremy Lamb retiring. Yes, I did that on purpose.
I love that. I love that.
So Lamb, as much as Kemba Walker is the perfect example of a player growing up in a system and sticking with it and becoming an all NBA player because of it, he is the cream of the crop with the guys that go through a really tough stretch, having been on the 7-win Bobcat team and coming out on the other side way better, not only because of that, but even going to a place that values him like Boston, where they were still looking to contend. That's the extreme example. A smaller example, but also hits it hits in a very real way, is Jeremy Lamb.
Yeah.
Like it's something similar where Lamb gets drafted by the Heat, gets traded to the Thunder in that James Harden trade. He was a part of James Harden going to Houston. Then he comes over here to Charlotte.
Do you remember who for?
Was it Luke Ridnour? Was it?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
Ridnour was traded like to 6 different teams in 24 hours. It was
exactly.
God, it was nuts. But so Jeremy Lamb comes to Charlotte as an unproven basketball player, 2 different spots early in his career, had not figured it out yet. And he comes here as like a real reclamation project. I laugh because I think of Steve Clifford absolutely roasting this man at the podium. When Jeremy Lamb goes for like 15 points one game, Steve Clifford goes to the podium and says, anybody in the NBA can go for 15 points one night. You might even be able to have a week of good offensive basketball, but it's all about how well you defend. And if you are good consistently, can you be good in the NBA for 2 months at a time for the entire season? Like, he was having zero praise for Jeremy Lamb before it was time, but it became time. It became time. And Jeremy Lamb parlayed his growth into a contract with Indiana, got paid. That would have been 2019, I believe, 2019 that he leaves for the Pacers. 3-year deal. I forget what the deal was. I could look it up, but
it's like 15 mil per, I think.
Yeah, good contract. So. Yeah, like good, fair, like good contract for Jeremy. So if Kemba is the ultimate example of that, Nata, like Jeremy Lamb hits in a very real way, just on a smaller scale, because he's not all NBA, he's not an all-star. But that was a success story here in Charlotte at a time where, like, after that postseason appearance where they play 7 games, it was a success story where there were very few to choose from after that 15-16 year.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, like, remember, he was unlocked underneath Borrego. Like, he was Borrego's like, him and Dwayne Bacon were Borrego's really first, like, success stories. We talk about a guy that was unlocked. You talked about a guy that was unburdened by Steve Clifford continually roasting him. But James Borrego got the best out of Jeremy Lamb. And I would say the Charlotte Hornets got the best out of Jeremy Lamb because he became again, people started seeing him in a completely different light because of what he did in that 1.5 year stretch between the year that Kemba left and then the year that he, like, all of that, like, he did so much work and it worked on himself and became a NBA pro. I'm just sad to see it cut so short.
Yeah, he had his best year with. I think there was one good year with Cliff because you had the 2017-18 season where not as much volume, but like that was a big growth point for him. And then the last year with Borrego, you're right, like more of an offensive burden. That first year for Borrego was the last year of Kemba Walker.
Yep.
They go on this that they go to a point where they're flirting for a playoff.
They flirted with a playoff spot, and they were basically a game out from Orlando, who was floundering at the time. And I think, were they coached by Cliff at that point? They might have been coached by Cliff. I think so.
I need to get my years right here.
Yeah.
One thing I'll say is, as far as where I was when I watched Jeremy Lamb hit that half court buzzer beater, I was also watching in my apartment in Nota, and I was scrolling Twitter looking for all of the Hornets community takes on watching Jeremy Lamb just hit a nutso shot. I found this tweet from Doug Nata.
Oh dear.
He said, I apologize to Walker, Mehl, and the audience of Locked On Hornets in advance, but I'm just going to be screaming Lamb nicknames and wordplay for the first segment of the show tomorrow. We were going nuts. Here's what I tweeted. I didn't tweet anything after that. I was just going crazy in my own apartment. But remember, Jeremy Lamb hits a game-winning three-pointer not even 2 weeks after that.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
He hit a three-pointer against Toronto, the same very team, a 26-footer with 3.3 seconds remaining, not even 2 weeks later, just a Raptor killer in that 2-week stretch at the very end of that season. So, like, some fun moments with Jeremy here in Charlotte. Okay, the playoff run that the Hornets went on, they were 36-46 in that last year for Clifford. They were 39-43 the first year of Borrego. So they flirted with that and then eventually got bounced. I think it was New York needing to lose and the Hornets needing to win the last game of the season. Neither one happens. And eventually, Kemba ends up going to the Boston.
That press conference felt like a funeral. That post game press conference felt like a funeral because everybody knew what was going to happen right after that.
Yeah. So, man, like Jeremy Lamb, a fun story when it happened. The last thing I'll say about Jeremy Lamb, it was his story about Nick Collison, and he talked about being a pro. And I'll always remember the cold tub story. He's like, look, man, you need a veteran in the locker room to help you out. And Nick Collison was that guy for me in OKC. Every time I would walk in the locker room, I'd look at the cold tub and I'd walk right by it. Nick would say, okay, might as well there's $1,000 lighting on fire. There's some money out of your pocket every time you decide not to take care of your body, not sleep right, not eat the right way, then you're just lighting money on fire. And Jeremy talked about how much that helped him thinking about it financially and also just how much he could progress in this league, how a veteran in the locker room, somebody as old and as mature as Nick Collison at the time, really helped him. Like I use that story a lot for team building now. Yeah. And so just a few moments there with Jeremy Lamb deciding to call it quits his NBA career. That'll do it. Big thanks to Nata helping me out. Follow him on Twitter at Nata the Scribe. When college basketball season is rolling around, they're also doing some great content too. Follow him producing too the Ion College Basketball Podcast with Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander. I'm Walker Mehl. Listen to me WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. Nata, I'll try to bug you a few more times before college basketball season starts.
I know. Worst case scenario, I'll put my phone on Do Not Disturb.
That's okay. Nata, you can't dodge me forever. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We'll be back with you tomorrow.